In the wintertime.
I do too. There.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Great. How about yourself?
I'm well, and it's 5, so please rise for the pledge.
To the flag, United States, to the republic, which is one nation, under God, visible, liberty, justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, let's get started. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the August 24th, 2020 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
They are approved.
Okay. Well, obviously we're continuing our COVID process here with board meetings. So thank you for being here today. Staff obviously has been not here to try to limit the numbers of people in the room, but the first item on the agenda is the request to approve vacating an easement, utility easement at 1438 Conneaut Avenue. This is a 10-foot wide easement across the frontage of this house, this property. It was put in place back in 2008 to construct a sanitary sewer pump station that has been there since that time. Last couple of years here, we did move that pump station to the east down to 1353 Conneaut after we had purchased the parcel and then built the pump station. And so after that was built and put into service, we dismantled the pump station at 1438 Conneaut. And so the property owners had asked us if we don't need the easement across the frontage anymore, if we could vacate that easement. So staff did look at the sewer, the sanitary sewer, and where it lies within the public right of way. And we've determined that we can maintain the sanitary sewer going forward without that easement. There's a manhole that's still in the right of way of that property. And the sewer flows to the west and then crosses the street there. But we can do everything within the public right of way. We don't need the easement any longer. So our recommendation is to the board would be to approve vacating the utility easement. And I gave you a copy of the easement that was signed back in 2008. You can see that.
Brian, was the easement just across that one parcel?
Yeah, so there was another easement across the parcel to the. So I'm looking at the map now on the last map on the exhibit here. So the easement is on number 37. There is an easement that was called out under parcel number 36. It was a 5-foot easement similar to what's under 35 and going further west. Number 36 has a storm sewer that lies past the sanitary sewer, so that would still be needed. That storm sewer does not go down to number 37, however. And the slope of the property would not require a storm sewer there because the yard slopes towards the street. So we didn't look at vacating, and also the property owner from number 36 didn't contact us about vacating that. The pump station was in the eastern corner, southeastern corner of parcel 37. That's where the pump station used to sit. So the force main then went to the east down towards Simpson Garden Park, and then cross country a little ways, but.
Thanks.
Sure.
Discussion?
Madam Chair, I move we approve Resolution 10, 2020-01, vacating a utility easement at 1438 Conneaut Avenue.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Approved.
Okay, thank you. The next item is request for our 21 annual inventory. This a lot of this revolves around advertising for bids for chemical inventory at our water plant and wastewater plant. But we do have some insurance that we purchase each year to cover our assets, as well as scrap materials that are included in this ordinance when it does get to city council. The chemical contracts that we have, they are typically for a 12-month period. We set them up so that they run from April 1st until March 31st. And that works better for financing instead of the calendar year when we're trying to do budgets and approve purchase orders. It's always difficult to approve a purchase order for next year when the budget isn't approved for next year, even though we have bids for next year. So by offsetting it, we can take bids early, later this year or early next year, get the contract signed, and then issue a purchase order within the 21 budget year. So this is how we've typically done these. There's really nothing new about that process. With this, we typically ask for approval to use the AMP has a joint purchasing program where they will go out and acquire pricing on different materials that the membership might use, poles, transformers, wires, those types of things. And in cases where that may offer a lower price than what we can secure through getting quotes on our own, we've used their price. Hasn't been used greatly because typically the prices that we get will be better or more competitive than what AMP has secured, even though they do try to have this, the more you buy, the cheaper things typically tend to get. We don't always see that, but on occasion it does work out. So this resolution does bring into the approval our use of the joint purchasing program. There's no obligation to buy anything through their program. It just basically says that we're going to use this as another quoting system for pricing on equipment that we might need to buy for the electric division. And this is very similar to what we've done in many years in the past. It's sort of an annual thing that we do. So Megan and Amy has probably seen us in the past.
Questions?
Just one quick question.
Sure.
And it might just be a terminology thing. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. Within the resolution itself, it just mentions the AMP joint purchasing program for calendar year 2021. But then that would leave you the first part of 2022 where it seems like there would be a gap between what this says and what that program would be. Am I misreading that?
Yeah. So going back to the first page, my write-up, where I say the current chemical contracts are from March 31st.
Mm-hmm.
That's a separate issue.
Okay.
That's something that we do. We request bids when city council, if they would pass an ordinance for this, we would handle that the way we would handle most construction projects that are where the price is going to be more than $50,000. So we would advertise for bids for those chemicals that we're going to purchase in the contract that we put out. The advertisement would say this contract will be for 12 months beginning April 1st and running through March 31st of the next year. And so we would receive bids, we'd open them, we'd take the lowest and best bid for that chemical, and we sign that contract, and that's who we would buy from for that calendar year. The AMP joint purchasing program is totally separate from that.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if I didn't clarify that. So in the resolution, the chemicals would fall under that second whereas. So we'll say purchase annual inventory requirements for electric, water, and wastewater divisions. That's where we would.
Okay.
We counted the chemicals. The joint purchase program is that last whereas, and that does run off of a calendar year for their process. So I'm sorry for the confusion there.
Oh, no, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Sure.
Questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve resolution 10202002, authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into contract for supplying annual inventory requirements, underground and overhead lines insurance, sale of scrap materials, and participation in the AMP joint purchasing program in 2021.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved.
Okay, thank you. Next item is a request to advertise for bids for the carbon dioxide system at the water treatment plant. I tried to give you some detail, probably a little more than what we typically would put into the board packet, but I was trying to give you some of the nuances of how our current system works and why, and what the need is for this new carbon dioxide chemical feed system. So essentially what we have now is a bubble diffuser system, and it's an older, less efficient process than what we can buy on the market today, or what is manufactured today. And with our EPA requirements for optimum corrosion control parameters that we have to meet, that were put on just a couple of years ago when Waterville was added, there's very fine limits on the pH adjustments we have to make and the alkalinity with that water to ensure we're complying with those corrosion control parameters. And so as the conventional plant gets up to peak production, we found that the current system has some difficulties in adjusting the water to meet those needs. And our anticipation is that once the microfiltration process, again, that's the RO process, but once that is fully online and done, we're going to go back to the EPA and ask them to revise the design treatment rate, flow rate for the conventional plant. That currently is at 7.5 million gallons per day. And we're going to ask them to increase that by, I think it's around 1.6 million gallons per day. So that would move that up to 9.1. If we do that, then we're pretty confident that the current carbon dioxide system will not be able to provide the adequate treatment to meet those corrosion control parameters. And so that's why we looked at, so how do we do that? What do we change? And the answer really is to buy a new skid package system and install that at the plant and change out how we feed CO2 to bring the pH and alkalinity into those required parameters. We did work with Reese Engineering on this, and they evaluated different chemical feed systems that are on the market today, and they came up with 3 options for us. All of them were what we would call a side stream treatment method, and that's basically where after the softening tanks, after the lime softening process, that water is then going to go to the recarbonation basin. We would pull a small amount of that softened water off. You would dose a high dose of CO2 into that smaller side stream of softened water. And based on how much flow you're treating at that time, you can dial in the pH and alkalinity adjustment very fine-tune into that smaller side stream. And then once you have your carbonic acid created, you can feed that back into that same pipe a little farther downstream, and then that goes to the recarbonation basin, and it's a much more efficient way of providing CO2 to adjust your water parameters. It reduces the amount of CO2 we would use to treat the same amount of water because the efficiencies are much higher. You don't lose as much CO2 from the old process that we have that doesn't transfer as much. You don't get as much bang for the buck. There's not much value you're getting out of that old chemical feed system as what we can get with the newer system. We've looked at where we could put this, and there is room in the basement of the softening building. And this skid isn't very large. It's like 8 feet by 5 feet by 8 feet. So there's plenty of floor space in that basement to accommodate this unit. We did choose this unit. It's called Blue and Green. It's their CDOX system. And I gave you some highlights of what that system would do as far as pH control, monitoring, backup side stream pumps with VFDs. It just offered a little bit little bit better quality of equipment than what the other manufacturers provided. That doesn't mean that those wouldn't work or we couldn't utilize those. But for what we wanted to do and how we wanted to fine tune that CO2 feed to dial in the pH and alkalinity that we really are trying to achieve, this seemed like the best equipment that we could buy. There's a slightly higher capital cost to this equipment than other options, but we did a 20-year life cycle cost. Reese did this for us, and at about year 15, maybe 17, they all about equal out, and that's because while the capital costs for this unit are a little bit higher, the operating costs are lower, and so every year you're gaining ground on those total costs, and so the life cycle cost of this unit really could be equal to or less than some lower cost equipment that we might buy. And for the value that we will get for the additional pH control and alkalinity control, we felt it was worth it. Staff did contact other plants in the area that have this same system or same setup, and had very positive reviews from their operators about how it functions and how they can fine tune the feed system. We did include $600,000 in the Water and Sewer Capital Improvement Fund budget for this. Our current estimated cost from Reese looked to be around $450,000. So we have money in the budget, and I would say that because we're so close to the end of this year, and we have not finalized design plans yet, and we don't have an ordinance from City Council yet, that will put us to advertising for bids likely into January. And so I would expect that you'll see this in the budget request for 21. While we do have money in for it this year, I don't expect that we'll see construction dollars being spent this year. So let's see what I have.
Brian, what's the typical lifespan of this equipment?
It should go 20 plus years, as long as it's being maintained and operated properly. There's really no reason why it shouldn't go past 20 years. A lot of the equipment we have at the plant is older than that. There may be some equipment that will be more efficient in the future. I don't know what that will be, but I mean, really this stuff should go 30 plus years. I mean, I don't have an exact number to give you, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be a lifelong purchase, so to speak.
Brian?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brett.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Brian, being a skid system, can we assume that replacement cost at the end of 25 years will be a lot cheaper?
Yes, you could, assuming costs would go down as time goes on and more options are available. I would assume the other competitors would catch up to this system in the future. Not everybody needs this level of CO2 treatment, so there will be other options in the future. But like you said, given the size that we're being able to purchase today, I would expect in the future that it will be about the same size, if not smaller.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the labor to replace it will be less since it's a skid system, and disconnecting, hooking the new one back up.
Yeah, in this cost, that isn't just the total cost to buy it and install it. I mean, just the unit itself. So there is some piping, there's some electrical, there's controls. We have to get fiber and communications down to the basement to hook this up. But our electric division can do some of that work ahead of time. And so there'll be some cost savings there. But once you have that in place, like you said, to replace that, if you have to disconnect it and reconnect it, shouldn't be that difficult. We do plan to leave the existing diffuser system in place as a backup in case this would ever go down or need maintenance in the future. How long that will be viable, I don't know. That system is pretty old and has been there for quite a while, so I would expect it will continue to be functional, maybe not optimal, but functional. And we would keep that operational as long as needed. So I don't see that going away just because we buy this system.
That kind of gets to the question I was going to ask, was with that one being a backup. I mean, are there concerns about, obsolescence of parts or any type of reliability plan with that? Or would we expect probably another program or another venture in the future to supply a backup or have a backup in service?
So one of the benefits of this system was it had backup feed pumps,
Okay.
whereas other systems we had to provide that on our own or didn't have an option for that. So if you lost the system, you were kind of stuck until you got it repaired. So that's one reason why we liked this, was that it did have backup feed pumps for the side stream. So if you did lose a pump, you could take it out of service and there was a pump available to use for that same purpose. So I think they've tried to think about with this particular unit, they've thought about those issues and incorporate that into their design. And, and again, it's maybe some of the other ones that were lower cost on the capital side up front. Maybe there's operations that don't need that level of service, but it seems like they've thought of some of this. But a lot of times too, that you find that the control systems just become outdated and need to be replaced, and maybe they can or can't be replaced, and so that can drive replacement cost as well. This is as a package deal. It's their control as part of the package that they sell, which is not uncommon for manufacturing equipment. You kind of buy a piece of equipment and you get what they're offering you.
Mhm.
So that's always an option or a concern for the future is, are those same control systems going to be a viable option in the future? And I don't see it being a problem here. I'm just saying there's many things that can make a piece of equipment obsolete that need to be
Sure.
addressed in the future.
Thank you.
Questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move to approve resolution 10202003, authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for a carbon dioxide chemical feed system at the water treatment plant.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approved.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is also at the water treatment plant. This one is revolving around elevator repairs. So we have a freight service elevator that's in the softening building as well, same as the last item. It's been properly maintained, but given the age of it is basically the same age as the building, it's had a lot of wear and tear on it. Normal use of the plant, and we're finding that it's having hydraulic issues and just other maintenance that needs to be to the point where now we need to repair this in a bigger way. So we did. We got a quote from a contractor to help us with replacing some of the pieces and parts. They had given us an estimate of around $100,000 to do the work. A little bit less than that, but we still went ahead and hired Jones and Henry for this project to assist us with engineering on developing some plans or specifications, so we could put it out for bid and we could get more than one contractor to supply a price for this. So Jones and Henry is currently working on that now. Their recommendations seem to be lining up with what the contractor provided to us previously, which was to replace the shaft and the hydraulic, the pump, the process that lifts the elevator up and down. Sorry, I'm not an elevator expert, so apologize for that. But this is based on if they can replace the equipment that's there today. So if, as I understand it, there's a hole or there's a hole below the elevator, and if they can't pull that shaft out and put a new shaft in the same hole, then those costs could go higher. If the hole collapses when they pull that equipment out, they may have to drill a new hole. So that $100,000 is assuming that they're going to be able just to take it out, put a new one in, and off they go. May happen, may not happen. But again, that's kind of why we're hiring Jones and Henry, to give us some better specifications that we can use for getting prices. Similar to the last one, we did have money in the Water and Sewer Capital Improvement Fund budget. We had $200,000 listed there. We're talking about maybe $100,000 for this work. Again, I don't expect for that to be done this year, just because of the time for the ordinance to be completed. We'll be into December. So likely in January is when we would, as early as when we'd be able to advertise for bids and get a project out for advertising for bids. So I would expect you'll also see this one in the next budget request we do for 21.
Just for reference, did they get, I mean, you kind of mentioned some of the, fallback, potential issues during the work. Did they give you an idea as if we have these types of issues, is the worst case scenario 150,000 or is the worst case scenario like 350,000?
Yeah, I didn't get that from them. They didn't provide a price for if they had to drill a hole, what that would be. Given that the shaft and the motor, the hydraulic system was going to be was around $75,000. So I upped it to the $100,000 as a number to say, well, there could be some issues that they find, or maybe things don't fit quite the same as before. There'll be extra work in there. So their original number was 75. I said 100,000 just to try to cover some of those things. I don't think what they're talking about is drilling a 6 or 8 inch hole so many feet deep to try to reestablish, and then they would put a PVC or a metal sleeve in that hole to preserve it or to make sure it doesn't collapse again. Those costs probably don't typically run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars range.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to get to that point, but to answer your question, I don't have that number.
That's fair. Thank you.
Brian, one other thing you might want to be aware of is contaminated soil. I don't know if you've been losing hydraulic fluid or what, but sometimes you get into those projects and you have contaminated soil that you have to deal with.
That's an excellent comment, Brett. Thank you. I'll be sure to talk to Jones and Henry about that when we're putting together our specifications. Thank you.
Questions?
Madam Chair, I move we approve Resolution 10/2020-04, authorizing the Utilities Director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for elevator repairs at the water treatment.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Thank you. Okay, the last item here is, we've talked about this at a couple of last meetings here, the June 22nd and the August 24th meeting. We have finalized what we would recommend to the board as a policy for your consideration now. Last couple of times we had an example at the June 22nd meeting, then we had a rough draft at the August 24th meeting. So we've made some changes and edits to that based on some things we've learned and some additional questions and brainstorming ideas between the consultant and ourselves. And I tried to highlight some of those for you here that are the big picture things. The first one was we initially had talked about performing an annual credit to the customer's account the way we've done it in past years. And that's really because we weren't sure that the billing system was able to perform that function monthly as part of the monthly bill that's sent to customers. So with talking with Aclara, which is our meter reading company, and New World, which is our billing software company, we are able to read in through Aclara the kilowatt hours that we deliver to a customer and the kilowatt hours that we receive from a customer off that same meter. The metering system can get that information in, and New World is able to pull that data out of the metering software as well. So by establishing a rate, we get the reads in, we can do a monthly credit automatically instead of doing an annual credit manually. And our thought is if we can do something automatically and get the credit back to the customer, that kind of clears off that month's either usage or what they delivered to us, and it takes care of it in that month. And there's no reason to go back and do a manual calculation if the computer can do it for you, and we don't have to spend staff time on that. So that's the first bullet point. I think it really will be a benefit to customers as well, because they'll be able to see monthly as they're going. Summer months will get more of a credit, winter months will get less of a credit, and they'll be able to see that as part of their bill. The second bullet point kind of goes back to is somewhat tied into the first bullet point, in that we had originally proposed a cap or a maximum on the number of kilowatt hours that we would provide as a credit to the customer. And so essentially we would say, whatever kilowatt hours you purchase from us, that's the maximum we're going to credit you back. And that would be used in order to make sure customers were not oversizing their generation unnecessarily. The monthly credit kind of takes that option off the table to some degree. If we kept that option, kept that as part of the policy, staff would have to still go back manually at the end of each year, review the account, see if the delivered kilowatt hours were more than the received kilowatt hours, and if there was, then there would be no change to the account. If it was not, so if the received hours was more than kilowatt hours was higher than the delivered, we have to go back in and make an adjustment to the account. Well, that would mean we have to put a charge on their account once a year, and that's probably going to drive up, customer complaints, because they're going to say, what's this one-time charge? Then we're going to have to explain, well, here's what the policy says. That's not going to be well received from the customer when they get this unexpected charge on their bill. So again, going back to the first one, by doing it monthly, it kind of takes that off the table. Our idea was not to do anything additional manually than we have to do. So if we take the credit monthly, then we don't need to go back and look at it on an annual basis. There's also language in the policy that limits the size of the installation based off of the customer's historical usage. And so going forward, I believe that the limitations on that sizing will make this less of a problem. And our current customers that may have gotten in before this policy, some of those may have been oversized and would not meet the requirements that's in the policy as it's presented to you. But the language that we added to the policy says that if you were approved prior to the adopted date of this policy, assuming that the board adopts this today, that those restrictions are not do not apply to those customers, and that we would ignore that requirement. So I think that's kind of been covered. For previous customers, for future customers, we'll look at their historical usage, and we'll say, well, here's what you can put in. If they don't have any, another thing we changed was if they don't have any usage, let's say somebody builds a new house, and as part of that construction contract, they want to put solar on the rooftop, there's no historical usage to look at. So in that case, the revised policy says that the utility, or myself and the staff, will look at what's the size of the house, what load is going to be in that house. Is it air conditioning? Is it a hot water tank? And we will determine what the appropriate size should be based off of other usages that we see from similar homes. And so we'll establish that maximum kilowatt that they can install. The third bullet point clarified some language regarding solar and battery installations. So the initial policy, the draft policy we had provided to you, just talked about the solar generation size or the renewable generation size, but it didn't really consider batteries. And both the battery and the solar are capable of pushing energy back to the city. I don't know how often that would occur, but the fact is that could happen. And so we're proposing that the monthly facilities charge would be based on the lesser of the, let's say, solar and the battery capacity, or the inverter capacity. And so if they had 10 kW of solar and 10 kW of battery, they could potentially be charged for 20 kW of a facilities charge. But the inverter might only be rated for 10 kW. And so we'd only charge them for 10, because that's the most they could possibly push back, because the inverter will not allow for the full 20 kilowatts to be pushed back to the city at any time. So we don't see batteries on every installation, but we are seeing them on more requests. We just got one just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we did approve it under the old policy because they submitted it prior to this being approved. And that did have a battery installation with it. I think I've only seen about one other customer that had a battery installation that would maybe qualify under this. But I think as solar prices come down and batteries become a little bit cheaper to install as well, there's going to be more interest in this. And so we're just trying to clarify to a customer, if you're going to put a battery in your system, this is how we're going to look at this. We're going to add up the generation capacity and the battery capacity. That will be one number. We'll look at the inverter size. That'll be the second number. We take the lesser of the two, and that will be how we factor in your facilities charge that's in the rider E. That's also in your document. I also recommended and changed in the policy for existing customers that this policy would take effect January 1st of 2021. And we would, for everybody that we've done this in the past, we've done an annual calculation and given them a credit at the end of the year. We would do that same thing for those current customers. Any new customers that come to us after this date, again, assuming the board approves the policy, we would use this new policy and say this is what you're going to use going forward. And I think that was it for the changes.
Questions? Say thank you for all your work on this. I mean, I appreciate that you've gone through all of these iterations to make
Certainly.
it fit for our needs.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And I assume the billing thing is probably a relief.
yes, it is. Well, you would hope that computer software can talk together, but you're never quite sure. And you would hope that an accounting software can do a negative multiplier or a negative charge on a bill. And thankfully, we worked that out as well. But you never know until you ask the question and say, "Can you do this?" You assume it can. Maybe not. So it was good news when we heard that the two softwares talk together now. Obviously we're getting meter readings in for electric and water through Aclara. The New World system talks to that software and pulls that database in, and then accurately bills customers for their actual usage based off of the meter readings. So it all functions every month today, actually daily. So not that it can't happen, but you just don't know.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move to approve Resolution 10202005, approving the interconnection standards for installation and parallel operation of customer-owned renewable electric generation facilities, 100 kWAC or less, and approving Rider E renewable parallel generation.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have, unless you have questions for me, or if I can't answer them, I'll give them to staff and get back to you as soon as possible, but I'll try.
Question?
Just on Michelle reminded me of the upcoming budget meeting. And typically, we sit in this room with the board and city council. So I would expect that at future meetings and at that meeting that the Zoom option will be available. We'll have obviously some in attendance here in person if you'd want to be here in person. But given that, like the building review that we did, this room could be quite tight for the number of people. And so that Zoom option might be something to think about for the budget meeting.
Do you have a date for that meeting?
Yeah, I think it's November. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I already have it on my calendar somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions about the budget, either prior to that meeting or after that meeting, typically we try to get them done after the meeting. In the past, I've set up times where you can come in and we'll talk in my office about, or over the phone, whatever you want to do. Talk about the budget, any questions you may have. Because so normally what we do is we present the budget at the November 9th meeting, or that first meeting in November. We do not ask you for that approval until the second meeting in November. So that gives you a 2-week window to kind of hear what we have to say, go back and look at it, think about it, think of some questions. And then we ask for your approval at the next meeting. And that's done prior to when city council looks at the budget, because city council does have to approve that budget as well. So we try to cover you both in one joint meeting. That's how we've done it in typical past years, and we'll continue to do that. But anyway, no, I'm done. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
You. Mayor? Go. Council member reports? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Start getting into